So if you've clicked on this video, there's a good chance that you are either going through or applying for the position of police officer in Police Scotland, or you want to get a bit of advice because some of it is quite generic for other police forces both in the UK and over in the pond in America and over into Europe. Now this video is going to be slightly different to the videos that I normally do, and as such that it's going to kind of probably sound more like a podcast than an actual YouTube video, and I'll be doing minimal editing in it, so there's going to be a lot more ums and ahs and pauses and me stumbling over my words. So just sit back, relax, and we'll go through the process and the application process, the recruitment process for the position of a police officer in Police Scotland. Now, I want to do a lot more content about the application process for police officer in Police Scotland. One, because it's something that I'm quite passionate about, and at Dowology we try to help people in their careers and whatever that career they want to be in. But also there's really not a lot of information about the process for Police Scotland. Now there's quite a lot of information for England and other constabularies across England. Police Scotland is still a police force, but it's slightly different. There's a few more nuances and there's a lot of different bits and pieces that they do in that recruitment process compared to England. But that said, a lot of the information will transfer across quite similar. Obviously they're both police forces or police services, and the assessment criteria, especially with the CVFs, the competency value framework, is used in both forces now, or both areas should I say, Scotland and England. So there's a lot of translation. So what I'm going to do is just take us on a gentle stroll through the recruitment process. Now I'll probably not delve into too much information, too much detail, advice, tips, anything like that at this stage. This is just going to be a bit of a generic chat, a discussion, a one-to-one about the different stages that you can expect, because the process has changed so much compared to when I went through. Just for a bit of background, I was a police officer from 2016 to 2021, obviously. I did 2 years in uniform as a response police officer, and then I moved into a detective role, and I spent 3 years in various detective roles in Police Scotland. So compared to when I went through it in 2016, compared to what the recruitment process is now, the things that they're looking for are still there, they're still the same, but just the framework's slightly different about how they're going through. So let's have a little look through the different bits and pieces now. So the first stage is going to be the application stage, and right off the bat, I think the application can tend to put a lot of people off, because a lot of people want to be in the police. A lot of people dream about being in the police. It seems to be quite an aspirational career, and certainly for me, when I was younger, I'd always wanted to be in the police. It just so happens that I went down the military route first, and then into the police, and then for some strange reason back into military, but that's another story. The application can sometimes put people off because they've got this vision of what they want to do. They start the process by putting in a request to join, to get the application. They get the application, they look at it and think, that's probably one of the biggest applications I've ever had to fill out. And it's, for me especially, should I say even me, having done a couple of jobs before I joined the police, it was probably still the biggest application, and certainly probably the application that I had to think about the most, because the questions that they ask, the questions that they require from you in the application, they're very specific, they're very detailed, and you can't lie on them. It's not a case of you could think of some achievement that you did, write it down, and that's the end of it. These are quite detailed questions, require quite detailed answers and quite specific answers. You kind of just can't make it up. Of course, some people probably do make it up, but they might get found out later on down the line when it comes to the interviews, etc. So the application, it's sizable. My advice is to get it, read over it, because it's about, you're looking at about 6 questions of various kind of intensities with regards to how much information you got to put on them. I think the first 4 are pretty heavy, pretty detailed, and then the other 2 are kind of less detailed as such. But it's 6 big questions that you've got to think about. And the way you're going to want to structure these, if you've ever heard of the method STAR, which is situation, task, action, result, that's a great framework. A lot of people, don't use that framework, but I think you really should be using that framework both for the application and the interview, which we'll go into in a little bit of detail soon. So the application, you'll start by putting all the basic information that you've got to do as normal with any application: name, date of birth, home address, etc. And then the first 4 will be more competency type based questions. Give me a time when X. Show me a time or explain a time when you use teamwork in a difficult and demanding situation, etc. And in other videos, I'll go into more detail about how the questions are kind of structured. But just know that using the STAR, so situation, task, action, and result, allows you to then essentially create a small essay. You know, obviously it's going to be a large paragraph, but it's not to say that you can't still structure it like you would an essay: an introduction, a middle, and an end. You want to almost set the scene with the situation. This is the situation I was faced with. Explain that. These are the tasks. Now, it's quite important to, and obviously you can't lie about this, but it's important to, when you're looking at the task aspect of the STAR method, is to not just think about tasks that you were told to do. Try and think about tasks that you identified that were to be required to be done, either by you or somebody else. So you're looking at the situation, you're identifying the tasks that have to be covered, either by you, by somebody else, or somebody tells you about the tasks. You're deciding about the action that has to be carried out. So the task might be identified, but doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do them. That comes to the action. What is the action going to be? What is the action that you did? How did you do it? Who did you work with? What were you feeling at the time? Issues that you faced? And then ultimately the result at the end of that one. Now, your space will be limited for your answers, so it's easy for me to say situation, task, action, result. You know, it's going to be, it looks like it's going to be huge, but you've got to be very concise and use brevity in your answer. Okay, so really get that answer down. Don't use fluff words. Don't use unnecessary words. Just the basics, the information that explains exactly what happens. Don't try and flower it up and make it nice. And then the last 2 questions, they kind of look more at your drive, your commitment, your desire to be a police officer, because that's what they want. They want people that want to do the job, like probably most jobs, but the police especially. The police really needs people that want to be a police officer. And your answers to that, and these are the ones you really need to take time on, because ultimately, you know, these need to be real. There's no point joining the police if you don't want to join the police. Why would you do that, obviously? But these questions, they're quite personal. Now, of course, you can have generic sounding words and generic phrases and all that sort of stuff, but you know, it needs to be quite personal. It needs to be quite real. It needs to be realistic. And ultimately, you may have to, or you may discuss these types of things when it comes to the interviews. So that's the application. A lot of people get put off by it. The best way, just like anything else, is not to delve straight into it, to read it, digest it, think about it, do a bit of reading, do a little bit of writing, come up with some example answers, work your way through it. How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. And if you need somebody to look at it, get somebody to look at it, get some help from somebody. Don't be put off of it by it. Ultimately, once you get this application in, that's the last of the sort of written aspect of the entire recruitment process, except the exam, which we'll talk about in a second, except the exam. Once that's in, it's in and it's away, and you can kind of forget about it a bit. And then you can just look forward to the next steps. So what are the next steps then? Let's have a look. So after the application phase, you're obviously going to be coming across the sets, and that's the standard entrance tests. Okay, so before it was a lot different, and the structure's changed quite recently in such that you would sit specific tests for numerical, reasoning, and for your language skills. So your numerical, your information handling, and your language. For my belief now, it's all one large big test, and you get a set amount of time. Now, there's a lot of resources both on the Police Scotland website and anywhere else you can find to help you kind of target this kind of question set, because at the end of the day, you could be very intelligent, you could know a lot of information, you could have degrees, maybe master's degrees. Sometimes these kind of little tests can catch you out. If you've not practiced them, you might have a great, level of understanding and, you know, ability, academic ability. But if you've not practiced these little things, they can catch you out. So my advice, certainly before I did it, was I found the little textbooks, little workbooks, and I just went through them. Some of them were quite easy, some of them were not. Some of them can catch you off guard. And it's amazing, it really is amazing, how quick you can pick up those skills on these basic level entrance exams and then get a decently high score. So my advice for these is to just put the practice in, put in the reps, as to say, find some resources. Certainly, you know, if you want to contact me and I could do a little bit of digging. I'm sure I've still got quite a lot of them around from when I did it. Get them in, get them done, and be done with it, essentially. It's a phase that can sometimes catch people out. You do get an option to resit it. Best thing to do is to get to a position where you don't have to resit it. You don't want to be worrying about these exams. You want to just get them done, get them out of the way, and move on to the more challenging aspects of the recruitment process. So next up, this is where it's different, because when I did it, you would do your SETS exam and then you would do the first interview, but there's only one interview now. And that interview comes on your assessment centre day, okay? So the assessment centre, when I did it, it was one interview and 2 exercises. I think so, yeah, I think so. But you would do an interview beforehand, which kind of sets the tone, allows you to kind of ease into it. But the assessment centre, now the way it's structured is that it's 2 exercises, so 2 practical exercises as such, and then there's the filter or, you know, interview type thing. Excuse me. It's not very professional. Now this assessment centre, I think out of the entire process, the assessment centre, you know, rightly so now, because there is no other interview, the assessment centre it's the big one. It's the big day. It's a very taxing day, mentally, quite physically actually. You do feel quite physically exhausted after it. What can you do? So let's talk about the assessment centre. So normally there's 2 different exercises and then an interview. The first one can be seen as an icebreaker type exercise to get people talking, thinking, you know, get the grey matter moving around. And then the other one's a bit more of a practical exercise. I'm not going to go into too much detail just now, specifically about the assessment centre, other than to say that there's 2 exercises. I'll talk a little bit about what I did on them, and then I'll talk about the interview as well. So when I went through, there was a discussion-based exercise first, and you could see that quite rightly so as the kind of icebreaker exercise. Now, I'm not bragging here or anything like that, but for me, this one was quite an easy exercise. It's something that I'd done for applying to be an officer in the RAF. So I'd actually been through a very similar tested situation exercise where you discuss a topical topic as a group, and your discussion has to be balanced, it has to have rationale behind it. You need to both be able to communicate, but also be able to listen. You know, a fine balance of all these different aspects, which are really required of a police officer, by the way. So I found that one relatively easy for me. Now I know a lot of people, I know a lot of great police officers, that have and would struggle in those situations, because it's not a natural situation. You don't normally sit down at a table of 8-10 people and be given a topic to discuss. That's unusual. Unusual for most people anyway. And I know a lot of great police officers that would struggle with this. The best way to practice for these things is to practice. How do you practice? You just start having discussions with your friends, your family, your partner. Now, your friends, your family, and your partner will probably dislike you towards the end of it if you keep trying to have a discussion about every topic that gets brought up. But honestly, it's probably one of the best ways to improve your communication, your listening, your rationale, your understanding, your power of persuasion, a big one for the police. All these personal skills that you could quite easily forget about. You might quite easily forget that you have them, unless you hone in on them and think about them in a bit more detail and practice with your family. The next exercise that I did anyway was more of a practical exercise where you were given a specific task, sort of a get from point A to point D, with using these different resources. Do it as a team. Again, don't want to go into too much detail about what the actual exercise was, because it's not ethical for me to go into too much detail about that. But what I will say is that regardless of what the exercise is, there's a couple of principles that if you just remember, you could almost walk into any exercise and be not only successful, but kind of be above successful. And those things are communication, team working, your sort of generic interpersonal skills, your decision making, and then just your sort of, how would I say it, your consideration, your time management, okay? Now, if you have good communication skills, you could almost do any of these tasks, You really, really can. Communication is key. I say that all the time. Communication is key. If you've got good powers of persuasion and you've been given a task, you could then start to kind of persuade the team on a direction to go. But to be able to do that, you need to have good, sound decision making. So there's, in the military, there's a lot, and especially as a firefighting officer, and obviously I started as a firefighter and worked my way up, we would do practical exercises all the time. It's just our bread and butter to do training exercises. And although we weren't doing these types of exercises, there's just so much carryover. If you've got communication skills, you're fairly practical, you've got good time management, all these different skills can just relate to there. So my advice for here is, again, to try and get involved in as much as you can in either work-based things, hobbies, extracurricular activities. But try and get involved in the decision making and involvement in those different aspects. So if you run a football, if you play in a football team, get involved in the management of that. You'll go to committee meetings. You'll get involved in cleaning the kit, handing the kit out. Get involved in the media. All these different things actually assist you in these practical exercises. They genuinely do. That is my advice. And like I said, I will go into more detail in a more concise manner, in a nicer, edited YouTube video, whereas this is just a bit of a rambling discussion. Hopefully it helps. Certainly when I was going through it, 2015, there was literally, not practically, there was literally no information that I could find on here. There was the odd forum where somebody slightly discussed what it was that they went through, but not in any detail. And they certainly weren't able to give any transferable advice, not specific about the process, but just more general to help you and assist you in transitioning into being successful in the application process. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to help you, okay? And then the last aspect is, let me have a little drink of my tea. Here today, gone tomorrow. Don't I know it? So the last bit is the interview. Now, I don't think I'm going to have enough time to give the interview the full, dedicated information that is required, because I think the interview is arguably the part that, application is difficult, the assessment centre is difficult, but as long as you give it kind of a go and don't shy away and don't say anything, you can get yourself through that, and I'll go through that in more detail another time. But the interview it's all on you. You can get some help in the application, that's fine. The assessment centre practical aspects, you can put in a bit of information, come back, somebody else could do something. Put in a bit more information, come back, somebody else can do something. So it's not all on you. The exams, yeah, that's on you, that's fine. But nobody's asking you any questions other than the paper. Whereas when it comes to the interview, a lot of people do struggle because it's a very formal interview. It's normally 1-on-2, so there's one person asking, and the other's writing, and they might swap. It can be a daunting thing to walk into, and there's nothing worse than you've practiced, and for whatever reason, the answer that you want to deliver, which is up here, gets stuck from here to here, somewhere about there, somewhere about the sideburn, and you just can't get it out. And I know a lot of people that have struggled in interviews, both for getting in the police, but also for CID departments and other sort of development opportunities. But they've been very good speakers, but it's come to the interview and for whatever reason they've stumbled over the words and they've just not been able to get their answer out. So the interview, I completely understand that the interview is probably the most daunting aspect. So I'm going to dedicate another rambling video just about the interview skills in general, but specifically for the police. So if you like and subscribe to this channel, then you'll get notified that I'm releasing another rambling episode, providing more information about this process. So all I'll say just now about the interview, because I've rambled on for about 20 minutes and I was only wanting to do 20 minutes, is that you need to practice. There's a set process you can go through with the STAR. There's a set process of the questions that I'll ask you, which I'll be able to advise you in more detail in future episodes of this channel, or videos, not episodes. And we're just going to leave it at that. Know there's a big interview there. Do a lot of practice, homework, studying. Reach out to me if you want a bit more advice. Don't leave it to luck, because that's the last thing you want to do with that type of interview, okay? We'll leave it at that. Other things that you need to do for the recruitment process, one of them is the fitness test. Now the fitness test and the fitness standard is reduced massively. When I went through it, I think it was 9.10 or 9 point something for, I was under 30 at the time. And I think it's now 5.4 potentially, don't quote me on that, 5.4, 5.6. It's it's very easy is what I'm trying to say. And if you're struggling to that, you really need to consider if being in the police is right for you, because being in the police is physically demanding. As a response officer, you can go into public order and all these other things, you know, the dog unit, where you'll be doing a lot more sort of running and moving around and stuff like that. But as a response officer, if you're only just passing that in your probation, of the low level standard it is now, you really need to consider if the job is right for you, or you just need to up your game regards to fitness. In the military, I have to still do 9.10, I think it is, on the bleep test. And I would never get to a stage where 9.10 is hard for me, because if the minimum's hard for you, then you're really going to struggle if you pick up an injury or your fitness dips a little bit. So I'll leave it at that. Make sure that you keep up on your fitness. If you need any advice about fitness, because I've done bleep tests since I was 18 and I'm a little bit older than 18 now, reach out to me. I'll give you a little bit of advice, a little bit of tips and tricks about the bleep test, stuff like that. The other thing is the medical. Now the medical is just a medical. There's a few excluding criteria regarding your medical fitness level, or your medical standard. They're all in the Police Scotland website, and I just want to say the Police Scotland website is a fantastic resource. So do a lot of your sort of research on that website. It's fantastic. You know, medical's a medical. You have to submit your medical records. Don't lie about anything is all I would say. And yeah, just go through your medical as required. And I'm not really going to touch any more on that because I'm not a doctor. So that's the entire process in a long 22-minute rambling type video. Once you've done all that, depending on the time of the month, I believe it is when you'll find your information if you've passed everything. Now you normally, I just want to say, for me, I did the assessment centre, just say it was on a Tuesday, and I found out on the Wednesday that I was successful. Now that's great, because you've passed everything up to that stage, but at that point I believe I still had to do the fitness test, which was fine for me personally, and not a concern, but also the medical. And I have heard of people, I don't want to scare you, but I have heard people of struggling through the medical for whatever reason, passing everything but then failing on the medical. So ultimately you might pass the assessment centre, get notified pretty quickly, but there's still a couple of other stages, including the vetting. Again, I'm not going to touch too much on the vetting because the vetting is what it is. So there's still a couple of other things before you get your final confirmation, your start date, that you have been successful in everything and you've got a start date of then. Okay? So we'll leave it at that for today. I want to thank you for listening. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, it means you're dedicated or you really like me, one of those two things. Ideally both, I'd say. If you do want any other information about the process for getting into the police and Police Scotland, feel free to reach out to me either through our website, Dowology, or through this YouTube channel or any of the social media, and I should be able to help out where I can. At this stage, we've got a part-time business, and we're looking to provide a little bit more of different type of content and different types of resources and services that we can provide people. We're not in a position to do that just now, as it stands on the 11/11/2011, all the 11s. But as soon as we are in a position, we will let you know. And then if you need that service, then you can hit us up and get that service. But anyway, I just want to say thank you before I ramble on for far too long. Thank you for watching all the way to this length of the video. If you have, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if this is the type of content that you want to be watching. If not, then thank you for watching anyway. And if I don't speak to you, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.